Welcome, all YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Periscope, and any other streaming services to Showcase Broadcast Studio and Real Talk with Michael Wardy. I am Michael Wardy, Certified Financial Planner and Regional Director here at Source Advisors, where we are providing all incentive consulting services to CPAs and our clients. Today's broadcast is something that, and I'll be the first to admit, gentlemen, I'm not quite that familiar with, so I'm going to be learning a lot. I know our audience is going to be learning a lot as we go through this. It's all about SOC 2 examinations. And I would like to introduce two of the leaders in this industry to help give insight, guidance, understanding, advice, and everything else that's wonderful about SOC 2 examinations. First, Dan Garrigan with Danza, Diarda, and Sousa. Welcome, Dan.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate you having me.
Thank you.
Like Mike said, I am a partner at Danza, Diarda, Sousa. We're a mid-sized CPA firm out of Buffalo, New York. We are full service CPA firm, so your typical tax, financial statement audit, CFO outsource, business valuation, pretty much everything that you would imagine a CPA firm does, we do. And then a rapidly growing SOC 2 attestation department, which I'm looking forward to talking about today.
Beautiful. Thank you. And also, Eric, I want to welcome you, Eric Martin with Vanta. Sorry about that. Eric, share your experience and really what Vanta has built. Do you mind sharing the history of Vanta? Because I was looking online, doing some research about Vanta, and I like the story too.
Yeah, totally. One detail Dan omitted, he's also a massive Buffalo Bills fan. So big season coming up there. But so Eric Martin here, lead sales at Vanta. Happy to give a little bio. We started the company fall of 2016. And what we have built is software to help streamline the readiness for specifically SOC 2, ISO 27001, and HIPAA, either audits or certifications. The way that our business works is, as I mentioned, we're a software company, but we rely heavily on our partnerships with firms such as Diarda and partners at those firms such as Dan. So really excited to be here.
Beautiful. So as we get started, I'm going to start out with a deep thought question for both of you. For our audience and subscribers, if you do have questions, go ahead and ask those in your chat section for whatever streaming service you're using. We will try and get to as many questions as possible. We're going to try and keep this conversation to a half hour, not to drag it on. Okay, here's my first question. What exactly is SOC 2?
I'll take it, Eric. So I'll keep it really high level. I think the best way to describe it is to bring up, kind of the business rationale of why somebody would need to go through a SOC 2. So, especially in today's business environment, it's becoming increasingly more common for a business to outsource certain business functions of their own, to what we call service providers. And when they do that, they take on a lot of risk, right? So there's this concern over, in order to outsource a portion of our services, we're going to be sharing with you a lot of sensitive information that's either ours or our clients. And before we can make that commitment and hire you as a service provider, we need to make sure that you're following, best in class security protocols, and that we can rely on your internal controls to keep that data safe. So it's all about who has access to this information. Are you using encryption technologies? How do you verify who has access? Are you scanning for known vulnerabilities? And then simpler things like, what are your hiring practices? How does your security team, how can we get comfortable that they know enough to protect that data? So SOC 2 is a framework created by the AICPA that has a predefined set of control objectives, and then the framework allows the company going through the SOC 2 examination to illustrate to the readers of the report how they solve for those control objectives, what controls they have in place. And then it's our job as auditors to opine that those controls were designed appropriately to meet those objectives. And that, I won't get into this now. There's differences between SOC 2 Type 1, Type 2, but in a Type 2, there's this coverage period where we're not only opining on the design of your controls, but that they operate effectively. So not only that you had policies in place that read appropriately, but you actually follow those policies. And all the controls that you say you have in place remained in place over a period of time.
And it may be worth adding a little color for folks that are brand new to this, and that controls as an actual descriptor can be kind of confusing. Like, what's a control? Think of a control as just like a laundry list of things that you as a company kind of commit to doing, right? So it could be processes, procedures, etc. So just for some clarification for folks on when Dan says controls, these are effectively just things that as a company you're committing to doing.
So who needs this? And I assume it's more than what I'm thinking. And where does it fit in? When do you need it? Who needs it?
Yeah. I mean, a big industry that's impacted are software companies, software as a service companies, fintech companies, and anybody that falls under that umbrella. It's not just limited to that, but any company that another company is sharing with you information that they need to feel comfortable that you're protecting.
Yeah, Mike, we help over 1,000 companies with this today, and the common denominator is that they are all kind of cloud-based software businesses. Mm-hmm. They're not all flashy VC-backed startups. It runs the full gamut. It's totally unpredictable who's going to raise their hand and request this. By and large, it's folks who generally are handling or processing sensitive data, and it's sensitive is kind of up to you to define. But by and large, there's a wide range of businesses. Most of them, though, being software companies that end up needing this.
Yeah, and one more point, Mike. It's rare that a company goes and has a SOC 2 performed just because they want to, right? It's driven by their customers, their prospects, especially when you start selling upstream to enterprise level, clientele. Their vendor management departments, before they're going to commit to a contract and using you as a service provider, it's becoming a very frequent ask, almost
mm-hmm.
automatic, that they're going to kind of, force your hand into going through that SOC 2 process.
I think, Mike, just for context, right? Historically, SOC 2 used to be a rather arduous, time-consuming, and expensive endeavor. And one of the byproducts of the emergence of Avanta is that these 20-person startups or companies can go from zero to audit ready in 1 to 3 weeks, and at a fraction of the cost that they might have otherwise historically spent. And so then what ends up happening there is that frankly, we just make SOC 2 that much more attainable for these smaller businesses. And what we're seeing is this kind of ballooned increase in demand, not just from larger vendors requiring, more and more of their smaller kind of vendors to get a SOC 2, but now many of the startups that we sign up are demanding SOC 2 of the other startups who they might do business with, which historically was kind of unheard of. So all that to say, it's been a fun business to be in.
So you build your company, startup, SaaS company, and you go out and your salesperson comes back and says, I just talked to the CEO and they said, we need a SOC 2 examination. Is that how it happens? Just out of the blue like that almost?
Yes, right. It's not uncommon if you're, depending on the nature of your sales cycle, to go through what one might call a risk assessment, right? So mm-hmm. They're basically checking the boxes to make sure that you're safe to work with. And it's not uncommon in that risk assessment for, to be asked to present a SOC 2 or some kind of third party kind of audit that you've had done on the business. The vast majority of companies that come to us are in this exact position where they don't exactly need a SOC 2. They haven't written it into a contract where they have committed to getting it by a certain time, but they've mm-hmm. just started getting asked for it. They've just heard the kind of scary 3-letter word of SOC, and they're like, uh-oh, what does this entail? We joke here that our second full-time job is helping companies to avoid getting a SOC 2, right? Because so many of these companies we work with are their time is valuable. Like, and the time cost savings is one of our core value props. But like at the end of the day, right? Like, no matter how you slice it, like the 20 to 40 hours that we're going to ask of you to go from a zero to audit ready, it's 20 to 40 hours of like high impact, engineering time for an early stage business. So, there are generally, you're right in that, like, that is how companies will be asked for SOC 2. But, one thing that we coach prospects on regularly is, when you get this ask for the very first time or the first couple times, like, dig in and understand why you're getting this request. And also ask if you can fill out a security questionnaire in lieu of the SOC 2, until you really start to feel the pains, because more often than not, like, if you're doing enough of the right things, that'll come to light in these security questionnaires. But as Dan's mentioned, right, like, SOC 2's become so table stakes that alternative route is now not, it's just not as attractive as it once was.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I said before, which I'm going to step back on, that it's very rare for a company to just want to go have a SOC 2 until they're forced to do so. But we do see a lot of clients that say we can get by filling out these security questionnaires, but they come over from these vendor managed departments. It's not like there's one standard form where they're just sharing a form they've already filled out. It's after 5, 6, 7, 8 security questionnaires, that companies are asking them to fill out. People start to realize, well, this is taking up a lot of our time. And if we just go through the SOC 2 process once, that's going to be so widely accepted that we're actually going to save time at the end of the day, because we can give them our SOC 2 report rather than filling these out.
I'm just jotting down a bunch of questions as you guys are talking that I know. I just got a text from one of my clients asking me, they weren't able to join, but they wanted me to ask. We do a lot on the research and development tax credit side for manufacturers, financial services, software companies. As what we're seeing is that there's more, and everyone knows this, there's more integration with technology. Is this something that, when we talked about SaaS, is this something that manufacturers, as an example, as they're integrating more and more technology, that they could have to deal with at some point? Do you guys see that at all?
I mean, I don't think that's the most common use case, but it's not out of the question. I was just talking to a prospect the other day that came over from a Vanta referral, and they were in the manufacturing space. And when they started mentioning that, my eyebrows kind of ruffled, like, why are we talking? But the further that we got into the conversation, their clients that were having them manufacture, whatever for, they send over to them very sensitive drawings, right? So they're sending them information that they care to protect, right? So if they're storing those drawings, and they're holding onto those drawings in perpetuity, or they have that sensitive data, deletion as part of their service commitment, that, hey, we're going to use these, store these, and then get rid of them, that would all fall under the purview of SOC 2. We would be able to verify that, A, you're storing these securely. Nobody else is going to get access to them. You're following your security commitments. You're not just sharing them with everybody, which falls under like a confidentiality concern that's part of SOC 2. And then, to take it full cycle, that, when we're done with your sensitive information, we get rid of it.
Is this an annual examination, or is it just a one and done? How often do they have to do it?
Yeah, typically annually. And that's really dependent on who's asking for it and why. When you start selling to these enterprise level clients, they don't want to just get comfortable that, you did the right things for, a month or 2 months or 3 months. They want to know that you are always following your procedures while we're engaged with you.
Yeah. So Eric, from Vanta and what you guys do, what do you guys do differently to help clients? Like, how do you guys make it easier? Because you mentioned earlier, we make the process easier, less painful. It's really a couple of different questions that I'm going to throw at you right now. Number one, where does Vanta make it so much smoother and easier? Number two, if I'm starting a new software company, I have 7 employees and we're starting to get our products out there, should we be doing this now instead of waiting? Where do we fit into getting this in?
Yeah, good question. So let me start by just explaining kind of how Vanta works. So historically, in this process of getting a SOC 2, the exercise of like coming up with your set of controls was put on a pedestal. It was this kind of exercise that companies put a lot of thought into. One of the first things that our partners tell us when we kind of approach them or they approach us, these CPA partners, is that for better or worse, SOC 2 has become a commodity. And Dan mentioned this earlier, that like the AICPA provides this kind of skeleton framework for like what's required, and then it's kind of fill in the blanks with these controls. So the reason we've had so much success and why this is such an attractive option for so many companies is because what we've done is we've taken that exercise of kind of coming up with your controls and taking that off the pedestal, come up with our own kind of like master set of controls that our partners kind of work with us to adopt when they're performing the audits for our clients, that just allow this process to be greatly accelerated. And then the other kind of core component to how this all works after acknowledging that master control kind of creation is our software acknowledges that like many of these controls are technical and can be continuously tested and monitored through read-only APIs. And so the first thing that our customers do, and we're the kind of the first movers in this, let's call it connected compliance space, is the first thing our customers do is they come in and they connect to a number of read-only APIs. And what happens is we then run tests against those connections on the hour and present these passing, failing tests in the form of a connected to-do list to our clients. So we strip out a lot of the kind of otherwise confusing compliance jargon, and we just tell them, hey, in simple terms, here are the things that you have to do before Dan can go in and like file your, perform the audit. And so then what ends up happening there is between the combination of these API connections and then homegrown tools to help kind of streamline the otherwise non-technical requirements, as I mentioned, right? This process that used to take, let's call it like 4 to 6 to 18 months, depending on the size of the company, can now be done, as little as 1 to 3 weeks.
So when you say that it takes 1 to 3 weeks from a client perspective, what's their time commitment?
Yeah, anecdotally, it depends. Like conservatively, you say 40 hours, but it just depends on kind of what processes and procedures you've put in place to date from a security kind of standpoint, right? And like, a lot of the kind of non-technical kind of headache tied to SOC 2 is tied to like the cat herding, getting the kind of personnel to go do the various things, whether it's kind of security training, background checks, et cetera, if you, decide to include those requirements in your SOC 2. But 40 hours is a fairly common response that we get from folks.
Okay. And are you guys seeing specific industries that are doing more, requesting more SOC 2 examinations than others? I assume that the gaming industry is probably not, game developers are not as big as maybe a financial services or anything along those lines.
Yeah, as Dan mentioned earlier, when we run analyses on our customers, the common denominator is, SaaS software businesses. But if we go more granular, then sure, like, fintech, ed tech, healthcare tech, it runs the gamut. But one of the more exciting things is just the variety of businesses that are coming out of the woodworks, raising their hands, kind of insisting to us that this is something that they need or they want to do.
Right. Where do you guys see the next stage going? Where do you guys see the next requirements, examples, anything along those lines? What's the future?
Yeah. Well, I'll go first and I'll let Dan go. For us, what we're all very, very excited about is we just started helping to streamline ISO 27001, which is effectively like the international equivalent of SOC 2. We recently brought in a former director of risk from a company called BSI. These are the authors of ISO 27001 back in '97 to help us accelerate the building of this product to make sure that we're providing truly what the authors intended. When our customers are working on this, I expect that I don't know that the demand that we've kind of seen and created for SOC 2 or the demand for ISO will mirror what we've created for SOC 2, but we're very bullish and just like excited, to help these customers with another kind of certification that historically has taken a lot of time and energy and a lot of brain calories to figure out.
Absolutely. And I know that's the big thing is saving time, because that's the one one thing we don't have unlimited. And so wherever we can save time and resources to continue to commit to growing your business, it's a big deal. That's a big deal.
Dan, I'm curious. Yeah, what's your answer, Dan? Curious.
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it. I think it goes beyond just the ISO, though. The SOC 2 framework is really flexible. We talked about these predefined SOC 2 controls, but you can also scope in other frameworks within the SOC 2 framework. They refer to a lot of times as like a SOC 2 plus. One that we do a lot of is, relevant HIPAA controls. So if somebody's getting questions about data security, but also, is collecting and storing, PII, or PHI, so, protected health information. Anything that's measurable, anything that has a framework already, so we have something to measure their controls against, you can scope that into the SOC 2 report. So you can do multiple analysis, and opine on a whole set of controls that are outside of SOC 2 built into that same report. And the reason that it makes so much sense to do that, all of these different control frameworks aren't necessarily a completely different set of controls, right? So we're already spending the time and energy on validating certain controls that are in place that are going to be SOC 2 relevant and HIPAA relevant. So why not do them both at once if you're having all these different asks?
Got it. In terms of geography, where are there limitations for either of you?
Dependent, but not typically when you're dealing with these SaaS companies, right? So it's becoming more and more frequent that people are storing their sensitive data or their customer sensitive data in a cloud environment, right? So AWS, GCP, et cetera, rather than on-premises servers. Now, if they were storing data on premises, then there's a whole set of physical access controls that we would be required to test, which is obviously not impossible, but much more difficult and kind of borderline if we did that without being on site. But when they are using this cloud infrastructure, and a lot of these SaaS clients literally don't have office space at all. There's nothing to test there. All of those physical access controls become the responsibility, and it's reported as such, of AWS. So we just rely on AWS's SOC 2 reporter. I guess a better way to say this is the client that's going through SOC 2 relies on the controls of AWS. Right. So there's nothing for us to test there other than that they're reviewing AWS's SOC 2 report.
Got it.
Yeah, I'll add that we just one of our reps created a data visualization 2 days ago to put pins on the map where all of our customers are, and it's literally all around the world. So
it is. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's what I was going to ask you. Is it primarily focused, because it's through the ASCPA that these requirements have happened? It's clearly not focused only on the U.S. It's global.
Well, it's predominantly so you might be based in Europe or Asia, or somewhere outside of the United States, but predominantly selling into businesses in the United States who are making this request for SOC 2, and so that's generally what's driving it.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. And Eric, I know you guys are global. Dan, you're working throughout the United States. If a company started in Alaska and they're doing software in there and they have a requirement, you guys can work with them on that. Yeah,
back to the whole discussion on if they're using cloud environment, and we don't have to worry about physical access controls, I'm sure. Yep.
Any roadblocks or hurdles, any red flags that a company should watch out for? I know we talked about you're selling into a company and they say, hey, we need you to do a SOC 2 examination. Should they just jump in and say, our customers are telling us to do that, we need to do that? I know you talked about the security checklist. Sometimes they don't think about that, or they may just hear, I know from a sales perspective, salespeople come in and say, customer just said we need to do this, so we need to do that. What should the C-level people say we need to do before SOC 2, or should they just get it done with? If somebody says do a SOC 2, should they just get it done and move on, or stick with the security questionnaire first?
So Dan, I'll take this real quick. So my short answer is there are certain industries or sub-industries where SOC 2 is just table stakes. So we'll have routinely companies come to us before they're even incorporated, and they're like, we're building a fintech company that's going to partner with banks. So like, we just need this out of the gates. In that situation, it's a no-brainer. It's like, go do this thing now. And so I've been told, if you want to sound smart in the world of compliance and risk, when someone asks a question, just reply with, it depends. And so my answer to you here is just, it depends.
Yeah, I mean, if you're an established business, you're not, an early stage startup, you have 100 customers already, and then one pops up that's, a immaterial deal to you, and they say, we want you to have a SOC 2. Well, you have a decision to make, right? You try to avoid that, because I have 100 other clients that don't need it. But if you're, an early stage company, and the first 10 people that you talk to try to sell to says, where's your SOC 2? I mean, you're probably going to need to, take on that task.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so if you're in fintech, more than likely, get it done with, no matter what stage you're in.
Yeah, probably.
Good. Okay. Before we wrap up, gentlemen, thank you guys again for helping at least me gain more understanding and clarity on it. For our audience and for our subscribers, thank you for joining. If you do have questions, you can reach Dan. His email address is right down there, or Eric. His email address is scrolling as well. This broadcast has been recorded. It'll be re-uploaded onto LinkedIn and to Twitter and to YouTube, so it'll be accessible going forward. Any final parting thoughts before we wrap up, gentlemen?
I just want to say, we just want to say thanks again to Dan and his team over there at Dorado. We appreciate all the partners that we have, and they've been really supportive of us and our customers. And just want to say thanks to him, and thanks to you, Mike, for hosting us today.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Mike.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your day and stay safe. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much
for joining.
Nice.
Bye.